Welcome to the West End Synagogue Trivia Night. Since the fast has just begun, I would like to open my remarks with a short game. I have prepared 6-7. You see what happens? It's like. So I have prepared 6-7 questions, crafted especially for this holiday evening. The topic, museums. Museums. So let's see what you've got. Number one, which museum is the most visited worldwide? Show me hands. Susan? The Louvre, that is correct. So the Louvre in Paris, do you know how many people? And how many people every year? No. Around 9 million people go to the Louvre every year. Question number two. Which one is the museum that is the most visited in the United States? Hands. Behave. Go ahead. That's very good. The Met in New York. 5.7 million annual visitors. Now, too easy. Let's go a notch more. Who knows? Where's the oldest history museum in the world? Ha. John? Nope. Whatever. Perhaps yes. I'm trusting ChatGPT, so it's like, who knows? The British, nope. Nope. According to my notes, let's, be honest on this. In the city of Rome, there is the Capitoline Museum that dates all the way to 1471. Pretty old. But perhaps in Cairo there is an older museum. I don't know. Now, where is the oldest museum in the United States? Helen? Nope, it's not in Philadelphia. It's not in Boston. It's the Charleston Museum in Charleston, South Carolina. Founded in 1773. Last two. Which museum houses the largest single building collection in the world? Nope. In the single building. Single building. We will get to the Smithsonian in a moment, but the British Museum, that is correct. In one building they have around 8 million objects, which is pretty cool. And now Zeb already gave us the answer because he not only smart, but he's also kind of a prophet. So which one is the museum with the largest collection overall? The answer is the Smithsonian. We are talking about 155 million objects spread across 19 museums, a zoo, research centers in all kinds of cities and even overseas. I don't know if you know this, kind of a geek, nerdy thing, but the collection is so vast that only about 1% of everything they have can ever be on display at any given time, which is truly spectacular. Now that we have warmed up a bit, I'm not talking about the lack of air conditioning today. It's like, let's turn from our trivia game to a real story. Recently, I came across a heated debate about how museums in our nation's capital present history for their visitors. Basically, the criticism was that too much attention was given to the most difficult moments of our past, leaving little or no room for stories of achievement and success. Do you know anything about this? Now, even if a debate about museums may sound a bit nerdy to some of you, I think it is a very important one because it raises a central question that goes way beyond museums. And that question is, how should we engage with the past? At its core, this debate seems to reveal two competing visions in our days of how memory shapes identity, responsibility, and hope. So let's see. The first approach insists that every mistake ever made must be unearthed, scrutinized, and atoned for. The central claim of people in this group is that a decent society cannot be built unless we are willing to confront the wrongs that have shaped its very foundations. The second approach argues exactly the opposite. We must turn away from history's darkest chapters and focus solely on our brightest spots. In its most extreme form, this view not only overlooks past failures, but denies them altogether, reframing them as necessary stepping stones in the path to success. Now, the problem with the first approach is that an excessively harsh reckoning with the past can lead us to despair. Taken too far, self-reproach can leave us hopeless, and the truth is that we cannot flourish if we lose faith in ourselves. The problem with the second group, or with the second approach, is that by ignoring our shortcomings or outright denying them, we shirk our responsibility. Without an honest self-evaluation of where we are and where we want to be, we close the doors to meaningful transformation and growth. So against these two approaches, the essence of Yom Kippur offers us an alternative path. On Yom Kippur, we neither dwell only on our transgressions nor ignore them, but embrace the possibility of renewal and repair. We confess our sins. We just did it a couple of times. But we also clear the way for forgiveness. We admit our mistakes, but we refuse to be trapped by them. In this way, our tradition offers us a framework for balancing honesty with hope and accountability with possibility. Now, you may ask, why is this conversation so relevant today? Which is a great question, by the way. The reason this is a relevant conversation that we have to have is because the work of tshuva is not only about what we do tonight. The work of tshuva, the work of repentance, is also about shaping the story of our lives. And that story, our story, depends to a great extent on how we engage meaningfully with our own past. So, for example, when we refuse to accept any responsibility for yesterday's failings, we feed a narrative in which we are always right. Today, I guess this is not coming as a surprise. Many leaders craft their public persona this way. Success is demanded and failure is beyond the pale. But you know what? Nothing could be farther from the Jewish path. Against the illusion of infallibility, the Talmud invokes the figure of Moses to share the following lesson. Lamed leshoncha lomar eini yodea, shema titbadeh v'teachez. Teach your tongue to say, I don't know, lest you become entangled in a web of deceit. In other words, the Talmud is telling us that Moses became the Jewish paradigm of leadership not because he was perfect, but because he was humble. He was aware of his limitations and was willing to embrace them. His greatness did not lie in getting it right every single time, but in striving to improve at every step of the way. Recognizing that he did not know was not a sign of weakness, but a mark of strength. That is why only, according to the Jewish path, only by accepting our own imperfections, we can actually hope to eventually evolve. Conversely, when our flaws erode all our sense of self-worth, we are left with no story to tell at all. When we erroneously believe that every effort leads to disappointment and every decision ends in distress, we may feel the need to retreat into silence, allowing our story to vanish and finally fade away. But that, according to what we learn, if we pay attention to what Judaism is trying to teach us, that would be a tragic and terrible mistake. Against that tendency, the Talmud commands us, Matchil bignud umesayem beshebach. We begin with disgrace, but we conclude with glory. In short, the Jewish tradition asks us to remember the ugly, but to make sure that we don't stop there. We are invited to confront the bleakest chapters of our history, not only to learn from them, but also and mainly as a reminder that this is not where our story ends. So we recall, if you think about the Passover Seder, we recall that once upon a time we were tempted by the shiny mirrors of idolatry. Not to dwell in shame, but to celebrate that we ultimately chose a different path, a path. And the Torah repeatedly mentions that we were strangers, that we were immigrants, that we were slaves, because the Jewish tradition wants to ensure that we never do to others what the Egyptians did to us. Time and again, our sources will present us with characters who failed. Abraham and Sarah mistreated Hagar. Jacob stole the blessing from Esau. Joseph sought revenge on his brothers. Aaron built the golden calf. Miriam gossiped about Moses. And Moses struck the faithful rock. I could keep going on and on and on, but you get the point, right? We read the Torah cover to cover, year after year, not to emulate flawless figures, but to be inspired by people who refuse to be defined by their shortcomings. Their stories remind us that we may all take a wrong turn every now and then, yet it is always possible to come back and do tshuva. We may have to deal with a measure of disgrace, but we are always striving to aspire to glory. Tonight, we are gathered here to affirm that we have a story to tell, and that our story, our Jewish story, is powerful, is meaningful, and is worthy of being shared. Ours is the story of a people who dreamed for almost 2,000 years of returning to our ancestral land. And it is the story of countless prophets who envisioned us as an Or LaGoyim, as a light unto the nations. It is the story of people who emphasized that the redemption of hostages is a mitzvah rabbah, one of the most important and fundamental of our commandments. It is the story of those who fought against the Nazis, even against all odds, and the story of those who defended Israel in every one of its wars. But ours is also the cautionary tale of Jerusalem's destruction and the loss of its two temples, brought about by baseless hatred and by reckless leaders who overestimated their power and overextended their hand. This is the story of a people faithfully, eternally committed to balancing peace and self-preservation, solidarity and fair criticism, truth and reconciliation, and tradition and change. Ours is the story of a people with triumphs and failures, with bright chapters and dark ones, yet always willing to learn from our mistakes, accept our responsibility, and rise to new heights. Ours is the story of Abraham Ha'ivri, Abraham the Hebrew, who, as the rabbis teach us in a midrash, stood firm when the entire world was on one side and he and his people were on the other. More than 3,000 years ago, Abraham showed us the way. And this evening, we are invited to follow in his footsteps. Abraham and his family and his community refused to blindly follow the crowd. They questioned it, they challenged it, and they ultimately chose a different path as their own. He became the first of our people because he proudly stood on the side of moral clarity, of spiritual audacity, and of intellectual depth. His path is the path we are summoned to take this day and every day, especially if we want Judaism to remain a living force and a source of inspiration for us and our children, and not some kind of a relic in some fancy museum visited by an occasional curious guests only once in a great while. As we enter these sacred hours of fasting and prayer, may we find the strength to face our faults, the will to embrace our achievements, and the resolve to act with boldness, carrying forward the legacy of our ancestors. May our story be guided by our past, enriched by our present, and devoted to a future filled with compassion, with generosity, and with hope. May you and every member of your families be inscribed and sealed in the book of life. And may we all have an easy and a meaningful fast. Gmar Chatima Tova, Utzom Kal.